Big stories can have humble beginnings. Some as simple as a flash fiction joke, a joke with simple message and one-dimensional characters. And I've got an author I'd like you to meet who has taken those characters on a journey from that joke to their second novel, infiltrating an arts empire to steal a treasure that shouldn't even exist. How did they get from there to here? Stick around, because you'll not only find out, you'll learn more about his book and his writing journey.
Welcome to A Book Finds You podcast. This week's guest is Dale Lehman. Join us as he shares the inspiration behind his book, along with his writing process, routines, and challenges. And now, here's your host, best-selling author, Rob Chalice.
Today's guest, Dale E. Lehman, is an indie author with 8 novels and 3 short story collections in print. He also dabbles in astronomy and bonsai, both of which find their ways into his stories. Dale's forthcoming humorous crime caper, Rooftop Sonata, has both. Happy to have you with us, and welcome to the show, Dale.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
You bet. It's a pleasure. So let's dive right in. And with you, you know what's coming. Because I always check if my guests are listening to the show. How did the book find you?
Well, I tell you, in general, and we can come back to this in more detail later, but in general, ideas are all around us. They can come from the most unlikely places. As you mentioned in the intro, the characters, Bernard and Melody Earls, who originally were flash fiction tale characters, came out of a photograph, and I just dropped them in as a joke. Basically, the idea, the photograph looked to me like a high-end shopping mall. And my idea was they're thieves. They're there to rob a jewelry store. And the joke was Bernard has carefully planned everything out, and Melody just messes everything up by getting everything he said wrong. And then at the end blames him for it. Now, part of that is they're husband and wife. So, that's where the joke comes from. But I wrote several flash fiction stories featuring them, kind of along those same lines. But the more I wrote about them, the more I fell in love with these characters. And I really wanted to put them into a novel. But of course, I knew I couldn't have them be that flat. There had to be more to them, especially there had to be more to Melody than just this ditzy character that she was. So in the course of writing the first novel, the title of that was Weasel Words. And it's called Weasel Words because they are stealing a silver statuette of a pine marten, which is a species of weasel, from a very rich family that's always fighting over this thing. And there's no reason for them to be fighting over it because it's not worth that much, but they're constantly at each other's throats over this thing. They're a bunch of buffoons, basically. So I had a lot of fun writing that. The idea for Rooftop Sonata, oddly enough, came from a cover concept that my cover artist gave me for Weasel Words. So we didn't end up using that one for Weasel Words. There was a much better one for that. But I liked this other cover concept so much, which basically is these 2 characters dancing across the top of a roof, that I told him, hang on to that one. I'm going to use that later. And so then I had to find a story to go with it. So this is a case of the book was inspired by its own cover, if you can make any sense out of that.
Yeah. Well, it's like, in a sense, how did the cover find you
Right.
rather than the book? But,
Right.
What's interesting, and the reason why I always ask the question is because we're agreed on one thing. We don't just go out there hunting going, I'm going to write a book now. I'm just going to go figure out what it is. That's that photo. There's that cover. Something triggers us. But my question to you is, okay, see, and you get triggered in a very creative way. How do you know when an idea is worth pursuing? So you got this trigger. How do you know it's worth it?
For me, a lot of it is just how well it grabs me. If the idea grabs me and it doesn't let go, that's something that I'm going to write. I'm what's known as a discovery writer. People like to use the word pantser. I hate that word. It sounds like you're running up behind people and pulling their pants down. But discovery writer it is a pretty good descriptor. As I write the story, I start with relatively minimal information, and I just find out what the story is about as it unfolds. So in a lot of cases, I will have a very simple idea, but it's an idea that I like. It just grabs me. And then I will start spinning a tale out of that. I do not do a great deal of planning. I have tried in the past and it always turns out badly. My plans always go one way and they sound stupid, and then my characters don't want to follow them anyway. So I've learned not to worry too much about that unless it's something that I really can't write without detailed planning. One good example of that was in one of my fourth Howard County mystery, which was called A Day for Bones. It involves the backstory involves a local family that has had a lot of businesses. They're relatively wealthy, and there's intrigue in the family over generations. I could not keep that all straight in my head without actually sitting down and drawing a family tree and figuring out how the different parts of that family tree figured into the story. But unless I have something complicated like that, I generally just wing it and see where it goes.
Okay, and I think I got my answer, but I just want to make sure. So I got the middle part of the book now. We're letting those characters kind of take us on a journey.
Yeah.
How about the end? Do you begin with an end in mind, or is that he's shaking his head?
No,
No.
no. I find that out too, usually somewhere 3/4 to 90% of the way towards the end. I figure out the end.
Wow.
It sounds outrageous to people who don't work that way, who can't understand how you can work that way, but it's not actually that uncommon. I don't know for certain, but my sense of things based on what Stephen King has written is that on writing is that he basically works that way too. I was at a talk by a couple of mystery writers ages ago, a couple of decades ago, before I moved to Maryland, actually. And one of them said, I have people come up to me all the time and say, I figured out who did it halfway through the book. And I tell them, well, you were way ahead of me.
That's great. And it's interesting. What I love about the show is I typically speak to business authors on another podcast. Business authors are much different. We really will map things out, but fictional writers, I think you're more the norm than the exception. They don't go in there blindly. They don't go in there without knowing what keys they're going to hit, but they let that story take them on a journey, almost like a journal to me. When I journal, I don't have an end in mind. I just know that something's nagging at me. I want to get it off my chest. I want to talk about it privately with my fingers and my brain. And then it takes me on a journey where I'm surprised it took me there. But it's just fascinating listening to fictional writers talk about that. It's
Yeah.
unusual for me.
I will say that it's also something that you develop as you do it. I've noticed that in my more recent works, I have a better sense of when the story is going off the rails. When in my early works, and I was actually just reading my second novel last week. I don't know why, I just picked it up and started reading it and went through it. And I realized that novel and also my first novel, they had some problems. I won't openly admit that they had problems that should have been fixed before they were published, but I was relatively green still then. By now, I'm noticing that as I go through a novel, I get ideas about where I should be going. And if I'm going the wrong direction, I tend to notice it and then I can back up and fix it so that I keep myself more or less on track. But I still don't necessarily know where the end comes or where the end's going to fall until I actually get there. In Rooftop Sonata, and I'm not going to give away the ending because everybody will obviously want to go out and read that now, right?
That's right. Don't do it.
The ending of that one actually kind of surprised me and turned in a direction that is going to have implications for further books in the series, probably.
Wow. And you've got 8 books? How many books?
I have 11 books, 8 novels, 3 short story collections. Rooftop Sonata is my 12th. Got my 13th in progress, and a couple of other things sitting on the shelf that I don't run out of ideas. I generate ideas faster than I write. I'm not one of these people who can dash off 5 novels a year. If I get 1 to 2 books out a year, I'm lucky. So
Okay. But Dale, when you start writing, do you try and push those other books off out of your brain and just stay focused on one? Or do you
generally,
work on-
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if I don't do that, I can get sidetracked. I have in the past sometimes let myself get sidetracked, and I say, "Oh, I really want to write this book right now," and I go ahead and I do it, and then I get back to the previous one. But recently, I try not to do that. I try to be a little more disciplined about that.
Well, I'm over here taking a deep breath because uh, You answer the questions the way you'd like, but I'm over here rooting, going, good answer, because so many writers that don't have the eight novels and the three books on short stories get distracted. And so you'll talk to people that have never finished a manuscript because they get halfway through and another shiny penny appears in the corner,
Right.
which is another idea for a book, and they go chasing it. What I hear you, I think I hear you saying, and what I do is I don't want to let that idea go. I get it. Make a note of it, stick it in a file, and get it out of your brain.
Yeah.
It's there. It'll wait for you.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the things that I'm planning on writing, I don't know when I'll get to it, is something that I actually wrote probably 20 years ago. Snippets of things that at the time I thought they were horrible. And now I go back and I reread them and I thought, well, they're really not any worse than any other first draft that I'm writing today. So
Yeah. When
I
did you start? When did your first book come out?
My first book was The Fibonacci Murders, Howard County Mystery #1, which I think came out in 2012. I always have to go back and look. It was around that time, the early 2010s.
Mm.
It was the first novel I wrote after a roughly 10-year period of not writing fiction because I had the misfortune to land an agent 10 years prior to that who turned out to be a con artist. And the effect of that, I didn't realize it hit me that hard at the time, but the effect of that was I didn't really write any fiction for 10 years. And every time I tried, it just came out horrible sounding to me. Now, again, like I say, if I go back and look at that stuff now, it actually isn't that bad, but I had that mental thing going on.
Right. Right. Well, you remind everyone, and look, if we have an agent listening, you be the exception to the rule. But most of the people that I know, and I know a lot of conventionally published authors, just the agent world it's kind of broken. Look, the publishing world isn't a shining star itself, but I've always said if you want to be conventionally published, a lot easier finding a publisher than an agent. And now you've added, we'll add an asterisk C bottom footnote of, and that doesn't guarantee we're seeing a good agent that wants our work. So
Yeah.
agent, that's a world that's a little, it's just struggling. How about we say it nicely?
Yeah, I've tried to get agents a few times in my life, and one of the things I've learned mostly from writers who have agents is that you have to be extraordinarily patient and persistent in order to find an agent. I've talked to people who've submitted to like 100 or more agents before they found one. Me, I run out of patience by the time I've hit my 10th submission. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I sometimes I try because I think, well, maybe this will be the book that I can get traditionally published, but so far that hasn't happened, and partly it maybe hasn't happened just because I'm not persistent enough.
Right. Well, and we're going to dive into your writing routine, but I just want to put a bow on that. The fact of the matter is that we chase down agents. A lot of people don't really even know what an agent does. If you're thinking an agent's going to get you a better deal, think again. What an agent can do, if we're going conventional, a lot of times is get a publisher that will not accept queries unless they're coming in through an agent. But I'm here to tell you that we forgot all about the word networking. So I know some very big publishers that will only take it if it's an agent or it's an existing author who will walk that manuscript in. So I guess what I'm suggesting to everyone listening is maybe spend more time networking with other authors if you're really just trying to get that manuscript looked at by an author that by a publisher that wants to hold back. Because they're getting flooded. We get it from the publishing world. They're getting flooded. And then to them, their first line of defense is, well, I don't know about this guy Dale, but if he's good enough to get an agent, we'll go ahead and look at his book. But a networking connection will get that done as well. So we won't, let's push forward. All right, let's get into your writing routine, sir.
All right.
You have a daily routine. Walk me through it. That this is since 2011. I got you 14 years. You're almost a book a year, it looks like. So you're
Yeah,
moving.
I am moving pretty quickly. As I said, I try to get like 1 to 2 books done each year. Sometimes I hit that mark, sometimes I don't. Last year I only got 1 out, but I've picked up steam. So when I was first writing my earlier novels, I took rather a longer time over them. Do I have a routine? Yes, I have a routine, except when I don't. daily writing routine. And part of the reason I have a daily writing routine right now is I am unfortunately otherwise unemployed. I'm a software developer in my day job, and that's how I make my money. I don't make money writing, really. End of last June, I was doing government contracting, and the contract came to an end, and my company was in the recompete, but they lost it, and I've been looking for a job since then. It's been tough. This is the longest I've been out of work. The one thing that's been nice is I can say, okay, I'm going to get up every morning, get myself together, get breakfast. I'm going to go out and walk for half an hour, and I'm going to come back in and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write until lunchtime. And usually I do that to some degree or another. Sometimes other things get in the way. There are a number of days when I actually don't get any writing done, but not by choice, but because other things are just getting in the way. What I tell a lot of people is that it's good to have a routine. The exact routine needs to fit in with your life. And if something happens in your life that disrupts that routine temporarily, don't stress over it, because stress is the best thing for inducing writer's block. You really don't want to have your writing be a source of stress. You want that to be a source of enjoyment. If you can do that, then you can get writing done. Some days I'll sit down and I'll get maybe 300, 400 words down. And some days I'll get 12 to 1,400 words down. I try to tell myself I'm going to get 1,000, and it doesn't always work, but I don't worry that it doesn't always work. It's so long as I get something done most of the time, then, a novel will progress. The novel I'm working on right now, I began working in earnest on about a month ago, and I'm already approaching the 30,000 word mark on it. So, that's working out to, on average, 1,000 a day, and there are days that I haven't written anything. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
it works out.
It's Dale, it's hard. I agree with you, by the way. It, people, a lot of times I'll meet people that go, I'm going to do 1,000 words a day. Okay. Okay. If you say so. I'm a fan of, how about we say 5,000 a week? And so we give ourselves some grace of, it just isn't happening today. Love what you said. Almost want to write that down in terms of the stress of that causing writer's block. We're basically giving ourselves our own pneumonia, you know what I mean? A writer illness. So I like that. That's why I want a little bit more leeway there. Do you have a typical spot you like to write in, or?
I do. I have it's a combination guest room and office. There's a history behind that, which we don't need to get into here, but I have a desk there, and I'm generally, when I was working, that's where I did my work for my employer. And then since then, I've just swapped that out for my writing desk. I can actually write most any place. I have a long time ago, when I was working in an office, I actually tended to write on my lunch hour. I'm going to say this on the air, which is bad, but don't tell my employers that.
Well, you're
Because,
allowed to work on your lunch hour.
well, you're allowed to work on your lunch hour, but some places they have these policies where anything you write on an office computer belongs to them.
Okay. Right.
Most of them it's such ancient history by now that nobody cares.
Yeah.
But I would do that. I would write on my lunch hour. That would be my writing time.
Right.
Sometimes, at home, I'd just sit back in a chair or on the couch and just write there. A lot of times in the evenings, I'd be just sitting in bed writing. So I can write pretty much anywhere.
Pretty much anywhere.
Noisy.
Got it. You mentioned you're at 30,000 words right now. Do you have a target that you try and hit of words? And notice, by the way, we're talking words and not pages.
Words, yeah.
I stress that to people that I know exactly what he's talking about when he says 30,000 words. If he told me I'm at 27 pages, I wouldn't have a clue. I don't know what his font size is, his margin size is, double spacing. So let's always have conversations about the words. All right, you got 30,000. Do you target it?
I have a vague target, and my vague target is this. Most books, for commercial reasons, will fall into the, let's call it 70 to 120,000 word range. And that's for purely economic reasons related to how much it costs to print a book. Ebooks that restriction isn't there, but
Care.
for print books it is. Now, my philosophy is that every story has a natural length, and you should write to that natural length. You kind of discover it as you write what the story is. But in general, if you are writing a novel, you want to try to target that broad range there. Most of my novels have tended to come in the upper 70s to lower 80,000 range. The one that I published last summer, it's a dystopian novel called Penitence, came in at like 92,000 words. That's the longest novel I've managed to write.
All right.
So most of mine are going to be shorter than that.
All right, so let's translate that. I'm guessing at 70, you're right about 200 pages, 220. Where are you?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just for those that
I
can't get
never
off the
think in
page
page count, so until I actually see it. And of course, there's a difference between the manuscript page count and the printed book page count.
Yeah, yeah, yep. Okay, all right, let's keep going. What's the most challenging part of the writing process for you?
The most challenging part of the writing process for me, that is a very good question.
I've challenged him with the challenge question. Good.
The challenge question, yeah. I would say that it can depend on what has going on at the time with the story. Usually, I think probably the most challenging part for me is getting a coherent structure, but that doesn't happen in the first draft. The first draft is me spelling the story out onto the page. And then my revision usually begins with looking at the structure and saying, okay, what have I made a mess of here? And what can I do to fix it? One of my science fiction novels called The Belt, that was a classic example of that. It began, you remember Kindle Vella? Are you aware of Kindle Vella?
No.
Kindle Vella was a serial fiction platform that Amazon put up a few years back, and they have just recently taken it down because it wasn't actually doing anything for them. But for a while, a lot of authors, especially in genres like fantasy and so on, were using it. I wrote a science fiction story on Kindle Vella, and when I got done with it, I thought, well, I've actually got enough material to put into a novel here, and it should be easy. It's all written. All I have to do is just wrap it into a manuscript, make a few tweaks, and I'll be ready to go. And when I got around to making the few tweaks, I realized that it's a science fiction story. People are traveling between Mars and the asteroid belt for part of it. And they're doing this in ridiculously short time. Even given reasonable technological advancements, there is no way that they could have possibly have made these journeys in the times that I had spelled out. So I had to try to figure out how to reasonably stretch the time out. And then when I did that, the events that were happening in the two places were all out of kilter. So I had to reorganize about half of the book to make everything occur in the right sequence of events. I ended up with what I thought was a really good novel as a result of it, but it was a lot of work.
Well, Dale, as a fantasy writer, as a fiction writer, rather than, I'm not trying to be lazy here, but I think you know where I'm going. Rather than create, try and figure out what technology, how to address the technology, what would stop you from saying in your novel that somebody created a flavoid that allows us to travel 1,000 times faster than we're traveling right now?
Well, I suppose that's one way you could do it, but I just didn't like that idea. I was trying to keep the technology reasonable.
Good. All right, good.
Advanced, but in a reasonable way.
We're learning about Dale. And one thing about Dale is he's not lazy, because the lazy way would be to create a new technology and say, it's my book and that's the technology.
Yeah, well, no. My late wife, who was my editor through many of my for 45 years, really, she was my editor. She taught me how to write. My editor, mentor, and everything. She taught me not to be lazy. In one of my books, I had a scene and she looked at it and says, this character would not be doing this here. I said, but I need to get the character into the story. She says, yeah, fine, but no, not like this. This is not, you need to rewrite this scene and have this happen instead of that.
Right.
Like, oh, but I got the whole thing done. I don't want to have to do all that. He was not real happy with me. But eventually when I calmed down enough and I actually did what she said, it actually made for a much better story. So I learned probably the hard way that laziness just doesn't pay in this business.
No, no. And we're putting our name on that cover. We got to listen to those around us.
Right.
Let's switch you over to a word that apparently a lot of people do not like, and that's the marketing side and the promotion side. I know this, Dale, because I tell you about twice a year I deliver a program at the Writers Center in Bethesda. It's a virtual program for book marketing on a budget. And every other time it's the only program like that. And every other time we put it up, we don't get enough people to even want to attend it. So there is the art of writing a book, and then there's the art of fighting for that book, promoting that book, marketing it. Take a deep breath, but tell me, I know you're prolific in writing. How prolific are you in terms of the marketing promotion side?
Well, I will preview that by telling you that I tend to refer to myself as a marketing moron.
Okay.
I really believe that there is a talent that people who are good at marketing have that I just don't. Now, that doesn't mean I can't learn things. I do try to learn things and I do try to apply techniques, but quite honestly, sometimes the things that come out of these marketing gurus' mouths they make zero sense to me.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just the way they're talking. I don't know. But I have kind of built up an audience through largely email marketing. And by email marketing, I mean I have a newsletter that I send out and I offer some freebies in exchange for people's email addresses. So they sign up to my email list to get a free book. And actually, I'm currently offering, believe it or not, 3 free books, 2 free short stories, and a free set of printable bookmarks that encompasses all of the covers of my books. So I originally was just one book. I've expanded that over time. And I have an email list that's somewhere around 1,500 people at this point, of which, I don't know, maybe 20-ish% actually open the thing on a regular basis. And maybe 3 or 4 or 5% actually click something on it
Yeah.
when they get it. But that's the primary way that I am reaching readers right now, in conjunction with doing newsletter swaps and group promos through a site called Story Origin. There is a fee for that, annual fee for using that, but it works really well. Through that, I grew my email list from 100 people who ignored me to 1,500 people, 20% of whom pay attention to me. Yeah. I also will do marketing through services such as Bargain Booksy, Written Word Media runs that, and a few other things. I just managed to land my first BookBub promo. It's not in the US, it's international, but it's my first one, so I'm going, yay, over that. We'll see how that works out. That's going to go out next Sunday. I say that not knowing when this is going to air.
It'll probably be out by then.
I do try to figure out what works and what other people say works and what marketing gurus say, but I'm not really that great at it. So yeah. I'm one of those people that if I could hand off the marketing to somebody else and it would work and I would then make money, I would do it.
Right. But yeah. Well, don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short, because and people need to hear it. Sounds like you've got a website, right?
Yes, got a website. Okay.
You're creating, you've got a giveaway. We call that sort of a whiffum sometimes in the business world, which is a what's in it for me to join that mailing list. Well, how about a handful of books? I don't think more is always better. So I'm going to encourage you maybe to pull a few off. It may give you an opportunity to go deeper with the 20% that are reading. And we've got more perhaps to give them. Because I'm not sure anybody's going to go, I wasn't going to sign with one book, but with 4, I'll sign. I'll give them the email. But I love that you're doing that. And it's really encouraging for people to hear that here's somebody who's doesn't love marketing. I have never met an author who does. And yet you are doing something that's, to me, very fundamental but important. And that is slowly, methodically build that audience, which is what you're doing. And you build it through the giveaways. When we go off there, I'll give you a couple of other ideas. But good for you. Don't, stay there. I know it's not fun, but I always, sometimes when I'm struggling with stuff, I'd say, if my kid came up and said, I don't like this, but I know I should be doing it, what would I tell him? Not to do it? I would tell him, go ahead, you got to do it.
Right.
So there's other ways too, but for everyone, so you know, there's many, don't use money as a reason not to market your book. There are many very low budget moves you can make that will market your book, but they require time and they're not as fun as the writing part. But good for you, Dale. You got something going there. I like
I,
that.
I try. Yes.
You're
Thank you.
doing it. Okay. We'll coming down the home stretch. If we've got all kinds of different listeners, some people that are working on books, some people that are just aspiring to write a book. I'm bump into a lot. As soon as they hear you're an author, I know you're bumping into them too. What would be one or two pieces of advice you'd give somebody who's never written a book, but it's on that wish list? It's their dream.
Well, the first thing that I always tell people is number one, write. Doesn't matter if you're no good at it. Doesn't matter if what comes out, it sounds terrible. Just write. Um, the one thing I like to say is, people say, I'm an aspiring writer. And, oh, what are you aspiring to? Are you aspiring to write? Then start writing. Then you won't be aspiring anymore. You will be a writer. As soon as you're writing something, you're a writer.
Yeah.
You want to be published? That's a little ways down the road. You got some work to do there. But the main thing is just to get writing. You're being a business person, you probably have heard something along these lines somewhere, that if you want to be an expert at something reasonably technical, you have to put in probably 10 years of effort. They used to say that, I don't know if they still do, but they used to say for a technical expertise to develop, you need about 10 years of practice. Now, they also used to say for writers, you got to write 1,000,000 words before you're going to be good at it. And you think, 1,000,000 words, wow, that's horrible. Well, 1,000,000 words, if you break that down into that range of novels word count for novels that I gave earlier, that's about 10 novels. And if you write one novel a year, that's about 10 years. Bingo. It all matches up. The exact word count doesn't matter. For some people who have more talent, it's going to be less. Robert Heinlein sold the first story he ever wrote, apparently. Most of us are not that lucky. For me, I started writing when I was very young. I can remember writing something when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. I wrote a lot through high school and college, and it wasn't really, I graduated high school in 1976. It wasn't until in the mid 1990s that I really felt that I was writing something good. I probably spent more than 10 years and 1,000,000 words trying to get good at it. And then after that 10-year hiatus, I was out of practice and I had to start not all over, but I had to start building up my skills again. So the main thing is to write. The second thing is to read, because some people will say, oh, you've got to read, not just read, but you have to read critically. You have to read like you're studying. And I'm like, well, you can do that if you want. I don't. I just read, because all that stuff that you're reading is just being absorbed by your brain, and you are learning by osmosis from good writers. You can also read bad writers and you will learn some stuff from that too, but mostly you want to read good writers. And then the third thing is, do put in a little bit of studying. It doesn't hurt to find some material online or in the library or so on about different topics, how to create a setting, how to create characters. If you're into planning, how to plan out a plot, it doesn't hurt to do those things. It will help you along the way.
Yeah. Well, outstanding advice. And I go back to the first piece you said, and I didn't want to get distracted. I was gonna kind of try and find it for you, but I can't find it right now. But I'll shoot you an email. If anybody wants this, I'll be happy to send it. Send an email to Rob at JOLLES.com. But I don't know if it's a poem, but somebody gave it to me, and it's called Writing is Writing. You already know the poem. But it's interesting. Thinking about writing is not writing. Planning the writing is not writing. Researching the writing is not writing. There's about 4 or 5 others. Writing is writing. And it's like you take a walk, every morning, it sounds like, or close to it. Walking is walking. You can think about it, plan it, whatever. You got to get out there and put one foot in front of the other. Only
Right.
guys like you, Dale, we put one word in front of the other and we just go. I don't want people intimidated by that 1,000,000 word mark, But I would say that just get writing and listen to enough of these shows because you'll see that everybody has their own style. My style is different than Dale's, but everybody has their own style. It's not a one size fits all. It'll find you. Your style will find you, as will your book. Dale, I've enjoyed it a great deal. You're a very creative guy and really driven. You got a lot of books there. And I commend you and keep writing and keep marketing. You're doing good. You can hate it. I'm giving you permission to hate it, but keep doing it because it's going to pay off for you. It really will. It already is. 1,500, those numbers start increasing even faster once you start getting those numbers up. So keep going, keep doing it. How do people get a hold of you?
Okay, so my website is just my name. It's DaleELehman.com. The first name is D-A-L-E, the middle initial E, and the last name Lehman.com. You can find me all over the internet. If you can't remember anything but my name, just Google me and I will come up.
Perfect. And I'm glad you spelled it. I can't tell how many authors go, oh, just find me, Larry Schwartz, at. It's like, the internet doesn't like misspellings. So
Lehman's not an uncommon name, but it's not common enough that everybody knows how to spell it. They usually start out L-A-Y.
Right.
That is a Lehman, but not my kind.
Right. Try Jollis. It's the same thing. People have no clue. All right. Really great talking to you. Thanks so much for being on the show, Dale.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's guest author, we'd love you to rate, review, and share this episode with others. If you'd like more information on today's guest or the Maryland Writers Association, please visit our website at marylandwriters.org. You can also find out about the history of the Maryland Writers Association by listening to our first podcast, Episode 0.